Hi, I'm Dana, and welcome to this week's question. It comes from Trisha, and she writes, my 2-year-old named Alex is not sleeping at all. Well, that's how it feels. He wakes about 6 a.m., he takes a nap around 11 until 1, and then he's up until 10:30 or 11 p.m. He starts whining around 7, so I know he's tired, but his previous routine does not work. He wants to be down with us in the living room, and he screams and cries until he gets his way. I can't let him cry, or else he'll wake up his little sister in the next room. When he finally falls asleep on the sofa, we transfer him to his bed, but then he wakes again around 2 a.m. and will not go back to sleep unless I go and sleep with him. How do I fix this, and do I need to cut out his nap? Well, I don't think the nap's the problem. I think that's the least of your worries right now, Trisha, so we won't even worry about that. It really just sounds to me like the boundaries were pushed and they shifted, and he pushed a little more and they shifted, and now he's sort of running the show. And I know with a toddler it's tough. It sort of feels like you're living with a little dictator, but you have to really be cautious about boundary pushing. It's interesting the way toddlers do it is that they don't push too hard at first. They push little tiny bits. Maybe it's one night he asked for an extra story and you said okay, and the next night maybe he asked for an extra drink of water and you said okay, and maybe he asked to sleep with an extra friend and you said okay. And so the boundaries started to shift. And for a toddler, that's too irresistible. They will just keep pushing and pushing and pushing until they finally see where the boundary lies. And it doesn't really sound like he's found where the boundaries lie at all. It sounds to me like he's pushed and you've agreed, and he's pushed and you've agreed. And so now you've got the situation where he's up way too late, and he's falling asleep in various locations on the couch, and now you're also afraid that he's going to wake up his sister. And that's a common fear, and many people with more than one child worry that if you go back to strict boundaries and making things very clear and black and white for your toddler, that it's going to involve some crying, and it might wake up the other child. And the truth of the matter is, yes, that's probably going to happen. He's going to wake up the other child, but it's just for a few days, and then they're both sleeping well again. I mean, right now, you're in an endless cycle of this. I mean, he's the boss and you're not, so this is going to go on and on. He's not just going to decide one day that he's going to go back to sleeping well and going to bed at bedtime. So you're going to have to reinstate your old routine. I don't know what it was, but if he's 2, even if he's napping, I'd like to see bedtime routine starting about 7 p.m. So, for example, at 7, it's bath time, bath for 10 minutes, get his pajamas on, brush his teeth, have 2 stories, and then into bed. And even with stories, you've got to be really clear. What's the boundary around story time? In my house, it's a 2-story rule. It's been that way since the day they were born. And of course, occasionally they push, but my answer is always no, it's only 2. And so you really do need to be clear that what those boundaries are. And then into the crib, I'm assuming he's still in a crib, which he should be. That's a good thing. Into the crib. And now what you could try that's probably a little different than what you've tried before is to have one of you stay in the room. Just bring in a chair and sit by the door. You can say, it's sleepy time, Alex, or it's nighty night now. That might keep the crying to a minimum, or it might sort of lessen the intense screaming that he might do otherwise. And it might not. I mean, he might cry even harder with you sitting there because you won't take him out. But you can experiment. If it helps and it eases the transition, then fine. You'd spend 3 nights in the room, and then maybe a couple of nights just outside the door, and then a couple of nights down the hall, just to get him used to the idea that he's okay in his own crib, that there's no reason to be upset, and that might ease the transition. But anyway, there's probably going to be protest, And the reason there'll be protest is because protest was working. You said every time he'd go in his bed, he'd scream until you came to get him. So you can be sure he's going to try that again, and he's going to scream until hopefully you come and get him. But you're going to have to show him that that's not going to work anymore, and that's not a good way to get the things that you want, and that he needs to, it's bedtime. I mean, it's really not negotiable. Bedtime is bedtime. And you're probably going to have a couple of nights where both children are up, or he wakes the other one, but like I said, that's just short term, and it just has to be done in order to get through this and get him back on track. So I hope that helps with your question, Tricia. Sleep well.